smartphones and social media. So this topic is going to be a little different probably than a typical Sunday school topic. So I basically have this topic split out into two parts. So the first part is mostly going to be talking about the current landscape of the technology of smartphones and social media, mostly looking at some of the problems that people are starting to talk about and some of the stuff that we all can relate to. The reason why I'm doing this is, so I was asked to, I think Jason, we were having some conversations, we were talking about all kind of different things, technology and stuff, and he thought that it would be great if I would be able to share a little bit about my perspective on this. And so part of that is a little bit of my story. So I have kind of made my career in technology. I went and studied computer science in college, did a bachelor's degree. Now work as a software engineer. So all that really means for you is that I'm basically a certified nerd. And so here's my first computer science course. Hudson here is giving me some coding tips. So basically, technology is something I'm really interested and passionate about, and I'm especially, as someone who identifies as an Anabaptist, I'm especially passionate about how we can wisely use technology and give glory to God in what we do. Part of why I want to talk today, I feel like I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of my peers, a lot of you, so mostly myself too, just from my own experience, and we all kind of can relate to this common sentiment that our phones and our apps on our phones are distracting us from what's important in our lives. A lot of us, maybe we talk about how we feel a little more anxious, we have less time for what's important. In general, we have less space for God, less space for spending time with Him. I've talked to a lot of us dads. Oftentimes we're wondering why there's so much of a pull to our phones when we should be, at home spending time in the evening with our children. So I think just the kind of theme verse for both of these talks is this passage from Ephesians 5:15-16. So, see then that you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time, because the days are evil. So, I think this is a very fitting verse to frame our discussion around how we think about social media. We should be using a lot of discernment and use a lot of wisdom around this technology. And so, in this talk, as someone who has worked in the industry, I've had the privilege of being able to study a lot of how these technologies work and how companies use these technologies to potentially exploit us and distract us so that they can make more money. So I'm hoping to sort of pull back the curtain on some of the magic that these companies use and a lot of these modern technologies and allow us to better understand how they affect our lives both physically and spiritually. Most of all, I want to just bring awareness of how these technologies work, and so that we can just make better decisions for our families and as young people when we interact with them. So one more. Okay. All right, so to get started, social media is getting a lot of attention right now in the media. There's a lot of stuff coming out of potential problems in social media. So about in 2024, the U.S. Surgeon General Vivek Murthy called for warning labels to be added to social media apps due to the rising mental health crisis. So it's pointing to some data coming out that what's going on with young people's mental health. And so he was one of the first officials to sort of call for, similar to how cigarettes will have a warning label, like this can cause cancer. Alcohol also has warning labels on it. So any of these like more dangerous, addictive substances, we have these warning labels. We also limit the age for when they can be used. And so he's calling for that. And that's no longer just a thing. This is an actual thing now. So just 2 or 3 weeks ago, New York Governor Kathy Hochul just signed a law requiring cigarette-style warning labels be put on social media platforms for users under 18. So this is coming. So especially for young social media users, if you're living in New York, I guess you're going to start seeing a warning label. I'm not sure how they're going to do that, but it's going to be somehow popping up on your social media feeds. Another popular topic, I've even talked to quite a few of you who have now read this book, The Anxious Generation, by Professor Jonathan Haidt. It's been a New York Times bestseller. It's been like at the top of the list for several months, if not years. And he basically is pointing to, he takes this, so if you look at this chart, this is a chart talking about looking at college students and the rise in mental illness. And so you can notice around 2010, 2012, it just sort of turns into a hockey stick and starts shooting up. And so basically, he's trying to answer this question, why are more and more young people struggling with mental health, especially anxiety and depression? And through a lot of interesting data and stuff, he draws basically connection to smartphone usage, especially social media. And basically makes this argument that around that time period, society, especially for young children, we transition from a play-based childhood to a phone-based childhood. And so that's what he's arguing then is we're seeing some of the effects of that coming today. We're also seeing across the US, more and more states are banning phones in schools. So just during the school day, there's at least some kind, every state has to have, in the schools, they have to have some kind of regulations around what smartphone usage should look like in the school. Last year, Australia has now banned social media for youth under 16. So you can see that picture on the right. That's actually a real picture of a young person's social media account. Her Instagram account is now locked because she is under 16. So across the board, anyone under 16 is not going to be able to use social media in Australia. So I'm sharing all of that to just say that there is a lot of public discussion, and there's a lot of stuff happening with just laws and regulations of flat out banning social media, looking at the effects, and saying there's something going on here. There's a problem going on. And so my hope today is that we as a church can start having something to say as well. As my dad likes to quote Martin Luther King, the church should be a thermostat, not a thermometer. So we should be at the front of this, setting a direction for what healthy social media looks like. So I'm going to talk about two different areas around social media to understand what's kind of going on with social media and smartphones. So the first is this concept called the attention economy. And then a second, I want to talk about some of the addictive elements that are part of social media. So when I talk about these social media apps, what apps am I actually talking about? Here are some of the top 10 social media companies. As you can see, we've got YouTube on here, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Those four are probably the biggest offenders that I'm going to be addressing today. Everyone kind of has their own favorite social media, so there's other ones on there. You got Reddit, X, those kind of tools. So just so we're all on the same page, these are all apps that would be considered social media. All right, so let's dive right in here. So the attention economy, this is a concept that's been talked about by different authors, and it's basically the way they explain the sort of business model behind how a lot of these social media companies work. So how do the social media companies make money? You know, the apps are free, right? You download, anybody can download it, you don't have to pay a dime. But who actually is keeping the lights on at Facebook, at YouTube? And the answer is advertising, mostly. So basically, this is kind of how the process works. Social media companies, their goal is to gather and extract basically as much data on you as they can. They then use that data to sell advertisement slots in your favorite app. They sell this to companies. They then target you with ads that match your profile with the ads that the company's trying to sell to you. And then the hope is that, you know, they make money by you interacting with the ad or eventually even buying the product in the ad. So it's kind of this multi-step process of extracting data on you and then trying to use that data to give you very targeted advertising that they think that you're going to be interested in. So I figured, so on that data extraction, you know, a lot of people, you hear this phrase sometimes, you know, if it's free, you are the product. This author here, she refers to the big tech companies, the way they harvest the data as sort of, she compares it to poaching, especially elephant ivory poaching. So I'll just read this. So when she says big other, she's referring to big tech. So big tech poaches our behavior for surplus and leaves behind all the meaning lodged in our bodies, our brains, and our beating hearts, not unlike the monstrous slaughter of elephants for ivory. Forget the cliche that it's free. If it's free, you are the product. You are not the product. You are the abandoned carcass. The product derives from the surplus that is ripped from your life. So essentially, what they're really selling is the way you live your life. They're gathering information on how you live, what you do, and they use that to sell that information to advertisers. So they don't even really, they don't really need, you're not the product, you're the way you live your life is, and they are happy to harvest whatever they can from that. So I thought it would be great to kind of walk through an example of how this data extraction and this attention economy works. So somebody volunteer, maybe what's your favorite social media app? Anybody? Instagram. Great, perfect example. And what's a common ad you might get, or what's maybe a favorite brand that you have? Have you noticed? Anybody? Snowboarding gear, perfect. What's a common brand with that? I'm not a big snowboarder. Ripple. Okay, so let's see how this works. So basically, Instagram. Kevin has his Instagram account. He's been using it for a while. I'll use you, Kevin, for this example since you got the snowboarding. So basically, how this works then is they've been gathering information on Kevin, the way he scrolls through his feed, and they're, you know, what he's liking, who he's following, the companies he's following. Not only is it that, but it's also, you know, they're looking at how long he's pausing at certain videos, how long he's pausing on certain pictures. Basically, every way you interact with the app, where you're using it, what time of the day you're using it, you know, what your battery level is, they've got it all getting recorded. And so this company then, Ripple, the snowboarding company, will come to Instagram and say, hey, we want to sell our product, and we want to target 18 to 25-year-old young men who are into outdoors and snowboarding and like, you know, adrenaline rushes. And so Instagram says, hey, we got you covered. We got a whole list of guys. And so essentially then what happens then, Kevin will open his Instagram app, and there are certain slots that are basically for sale in that app. And so essentially what happens, it happens in like microseconds. An auction basically happens where the top snowboard companies are going to be, in this case, they're going to be bidding for this slot. And whoever then has the best match to the ad to Kevin's profile is going to pay for that ad spot. So that's kind of a little bit of how it works, and that's a little bit then of how then companies then can basically get you to eventually buy a product. And so this process, it's very accurate. They know a lot of you, of what you're into, what you're interested in, and how this works. So the problem though, I want to make sure is it's not the marketing process that's the problem. Marketing is a great part of business. That's how businesses help customers find products that they need. The problem is the potential for the companies to exploit this marketing process that they have. So they've created this process and it works so well that it can end up becoming exploitive. And so the apps are then really not free. The app is free, but you pay for it with your time and your attention and your personal data. And this is where the problem starts to come in. So the more time you spend on your phone, the more ad spots they can sell to the companies. And so that's the key problem I want to raise. And just to illustrate just the significance of this economy, the ad machine really works. If you look at the top 10 most valuable companies in the world, you can't really see the numbers, but basically, if you look on there, so Meta, Facebook is number 7. They're at $1.6 trillion market cap, which is basically, if you look, that's basically the GDP of Australia. So I'm just sharing all this to just illustrate just how powerful and how significant these companies are. We're talking about companies that have net worth of the size of the entire exports of a continent. So that's kind of a summary of the attention economy. So the significant part here is these companies have significant economic power, and they are economically incentivized to get you to spend more time on your phone. And then, so this leads us to the next part, which is based on all this data they've collected on you and all this money they have to invest in engineering, they know how to keep you coming back for more. And that's where we get the concept of the slot machine in your pocket. And this is not my idea. This is this guy right here, Tristan Harris. He was the first back in around 2016 to sort of whistleblow on the sort of addictive, the way that these big tech companies try to hook people into their apps. So in 2016, he published an article called Smartphones and Social Media, a Slot Machine in Your Pocket. And he basically pointed out a bunch of different addictive elements of social media. So I don't know if you can see this, a little small. But he has a quote here, here on the left here. Facebook isn't saying, let me make design decisions that are going to strengthen democracy. They're saying, how do I evolve the product in a direction that will get more engagement from people? So basically, these companies, it looks like these companies are maybe not as incentivized to try to make the world a better place, make you a better person, help you learn more. At the end of the day, all they really need you to do is to engage with the platform more, sell more ads. That's just how the business model works. And so there's 6 different areas I want to talk about of how they sort of add these addictive elements, copying elements from slot machines in Las Vegas. So first one is variable rewards. So this is this concept that behavioral psychologists have studied where, they use experiments with mice. They found that if you reward a mouse to do a certain behavior and you give the reward at varying intervals, different times, that behavior becomes a lot more of a stronger habit. And so the slot machines in Las Vegas, they took that idea and they started, that's why you don't get a reward every time you hit the slot machine, right? You have to hit it a couple times, and you never know when you're going to get the win. And that just becomes a very sticky behavior. You just want to keep going back and getting that, because the excitement you get when you do get a reward is just much higher. So social media companies took this idea. Some of the ways they use this is in the notifications you get on your phone. So you'll be, you ever wonder why you're, in the middle of the day, you're all of a sudden getting these notifications, so-and-so liked a post, so-and-so followed you, so-and-so just posted something, all these kind of things. And it's all done, they do this using a lot of complicated algorithms and stuff and data on you to keep you engaged. They know exactly when you might potentially start becoming disinterested, and they'll make sure to give you some pokes in that direction. Another guy near Isle, he literally wrote a book called Hooked, How to Build Habit-Forming Products. This was sort of the Bible in Silicon Valley, and this was written in like 2014. Basically gave a blueprint on how to build products that people build habits around, basically addict them to. He did actually then later wrote a book called Irresistible, basically telling people how to push back against this. It felt a little bit bad maybe. So that is the variable rewards. Another element of variable rewards is this concept of algorithmic feeds. And so I'll explain what that is. So when we're talking about social media, and especially the media, you always are hearing this concept of algorithms. And it's really, especially you ladies, you're using algorithms every day. Basically, an easy way to understand an algorithm is a recipe. You take ingredients, you put them in, run them through an algorithm, a recipe, steps to the process, and then you get an output, a loaf of bread, a plate of cookies. So the same thing then with social media companies, with apps. Basically, the input is data, and you run it through this process of using software, and the output you get is some kind of app. In the social media, it's your social media feed. And so basically they're using advanced artificial intelligence algorithms to mix up all this user data they have and make it as maximally engaging as possible. There's another author, Cal Newport, he calls this concept digital Doritos. So essentially, just like Doritos are these chemically engineered foods to make you can't stop eating them, right? Lay's potato chips, that's the famous slogan, I bet you can't eat one. And so it's the same concept with the algorithmic feeds. They're literally trying to design these feeds to place the content that you'll see in your social media feed to basically be as engaging to you as possible, essentially so that you won't stop. Another problem, this didn't come up in my notes that's on it, but another problem related to this is the sort of echo chamber problem, is that because they are trying to present content that's as interesting to you as possible, all that really, because they're trying to give information that's engaging as possible, all they're concerned about is that you will be interested in it. And so you can end up then only seeing content that is in your little bubble and not actually, it's not a good indicator of objective truth, of what's actually really going on in the world. Steve, do you want to try maybe actually refreshing that slideshow on your computer? So just get this, I made a couple last minute changes. It didn't come through. So we have this concept. So the two we talked about are variable rewards. To keep people engaged, you want to give them little dings at different intervals, different times. We talked about algorithmic feeds. Another concept we will talk about is, so another one, there we go. Perfect. Okay, the next one related to variable rewards is this pull to refresh concept. So I love this little picture here. You know, imagine if it actually said that, didn't you check 10 seconds ago? There's this, and this is also kind of borrowed from slot machines where you have the lever you pull to hit the slot. So this just makes the app more fun to use, right? Not necessarily a bad thing. It's just another one of those elements that makes the app sticky, makes it where and that's how the algorithmic feed then, you're always refreshing it to see what you're going to get, and it's just kind of this exciting process. Another element of addictive element is the infinite feeds. So people will just continue scrolling because they never reach the end. You know, in most of life, there are stopping points, right? You read a book, you get to the end, you're done. You go for a trip, you drive on the road, you have a destination, you get to the next destination, you're done. You have a meal, you eat the meal, it's done. But they found that if we remove the natural stopping point, that's the signal to your brain that, hey, we're done, we should go do something else. And so it just keeps people continuing, and remember, their goal is to keep you engaging with the platform as much as possible. So it puts you also into this constant searching mode, and our brains love to hunt, we love to search. And so the excitement, your brain's always thinking like, oh, the next post, the next video, that's gonna be the best one. And so one more element also that they use is, trying to tap into our need for social approval. And so you see this with the like button. Unfortunately, though, it just kind of creates this artificial response in our bodies. And the person who invented it now is actually kind of regretful of this technology. His name was Mr. Rosenstein. He describes the Facebook like button as a bright ding of pseudo pleasure. And so essentially these notifications hijack our natural need for social approval, but they ultimately leave us looking for more. And finally, one more element that is especially addicting is this idea of autoplay videos. So this is I know for me, I get hooked into these. So one social media I used to enjoy using a lot was Twitter or X, and it's one of those examples where like you're scrolling through your feed and all of a sudden you find yourself watching a video of some kind of street fight, and you come to your senses and you realize, wait a second, why am I watching this? And it's because they find out that, this will get you sucked in. And there's also some research showing that this sort of turns off your brain, the part of your brain that tells you when to stop. It just gets you into this zoned out mode, and you just are like, I'm here to scroll. And so they've had research and at these companies to prove that this works, and it does. So those together, basically, billions and trillions, if not trillions, of dollars have gone into engineering and using a lot of these elements to make them as addictive as possible. And you'll see this in not just social media apps, but you'll see all these elements. Every app now is kind of copying this recipe. Because to get more users and to get them to use it as much as possible is how most of these companies' business models work. News apps, anything, your email, everything is designed in this way. So the conclusion of the slot machine, the addictive elements, is social media apps are engineered for you to use them as much as possible. So I went through that a little quicker than I thought maybe. So basically, that's kind of a wrap up then of the problem. And I wanted you to continue this frame of this verse. See then that you walk circumspectly, not as fools, but as wise, redeeming the time because the days are evil. So I hope that in this talk I've been able to sort of shed some light on some of the problematic factors. So if you ever wondered, why you can't put your phone down, well, there's a lot of data now pointing to the social media's negative effects, and we have this whole business model around the apps you're using, the attention economy, and then you have the engineered addictive nature of the social media apps we're using. And so next week, in part 2, I'm going to then dive into some real practical advice we can use, some things that I've done in my personal life, and just from my perspective as someone who's in the field and who's done a lot of research on this, just some practical things we can do as a church and as families to protect ourselves and to just, as this passage we read, to be wise and to walk circumspectly and to properly use these tools. So I guess my question I want to leave with you is, how much of your attention are you willing to give so that Mark Zuckerberg can spend a little more time wakeboarding on his Hawaiian private island? So at the end of the day, that's what you're using these apps in exchange for your attention, your peace of mind, potentially even your spiritual health. And so I'm saying all this. I know I'm not trying to shame anybody. I use a lot of these social media apps. I use a lot of, and so I'm hoping though that we can, work together as a community to have a conversation and to start figuring out a healthy way of using these apps. So in between now and next week, I would encourage you to, a lot of how we should start thinking about how we use these social media apps is to first reflect on your values. What is important in your life? What is the main thing that you want to accomplish in life? Why are you here? Why are you alive? And I'll bring in a lot of, I think some scripture and just how we can form a philosophy around, healthy social media and smartphone use. I think also it'd be great if you would, as you're using the apps throughout the week, just take a second after you use one and think about how does it make you feel? How do you feel after you use it? And it's great to just sort of take some inventory and just think about where you're at with that sort of stuff. So I guess I'll just open up to questions. I also will leave you with a couple resources. I'll talk about one of these for sure, the Digital Minimalism book. Two great books, The Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport, and of course The Anxious Generation, I kind of touched on it just a tad, by Jonathan Haidt. There's also a great documentary called The Social Dilemma. It's definitely a little sensational, and it definitely plays to your emotions, but it's a very, very revealing, and it does a lot better job at talking about this whole topic than I do. And so if you want to dive into that, ironically, it's only available on Netflix. So unfortunately, you will have to go there to watch it, but I definitely recommend it. It's a very revealing, just kind of a lot of the top engineers and people who invented a lot of this technology are in that documentary talking through it, just sort of saying, sort of regretting some of the stuff that they've invented. So yeah, I'd love to hear from you. What do you think? Is this an overreaction? I sort of, threw in a little plug, is this the new cigarette? Is this something, I think obviously it's not obviously not as addictive and harmful, but there are elements that are troublesome and worrisome. And so I'd love to hear any thoughts you have and how we can think about